I always believed that marriage was about love, trust, and a desire to preserve the relationship. I believed that when I married Grace 7 years ago. I wasn't a perfect person, but I was faithful. I worked hard, made sure all the bills were paid on time, and tried to put her needs before my own. But over the years, something changed. It happened so gradually that I didn't even notice at first. She stopped greeting me at the door when I came home. She no longer sent me little messages throughout the day like she used to. I thought maybe she was tired from work or stressed out. But then, even at home, I felt invisible to her. She didn't look at me and hardly spoke. Our evenings, which used to be warm and filled with conversation, became quiet. She would just sit on the couch staring at her phone or go to bed early. The closeness that once bound us together disappeared like a candle extinguished in an instant. I tried to remain calm. I asked her several times if everything was okay, but she kept her eyes on her phone and replied with the same lifeless, "Yes, everything's fine." Deep down, I knew that neither of us was okay. I noticed that I was always the one who made the first move. If I didn't text her first, the day would go by without a single word from her. If I didn't hug or kiss her, she didn't show any signs of affection. If I didn't plan a date, it didn't happen. I kept telling myself that it was temporary, that maybe she was under pressure. But in the end, I had to admit the truth. People make time for what's important to them. I was no longer on that list. Whenever I suggested something to bring us closer together, she found an excuse. A headache, tiredness, maybe another time. But another time never came. One Friday, I decided to do something special. I left work early, stopped by the store, and bought the ingredients for her favorite dinner: pasta with homemade sauce, garlic bread, and a bottle of good wine. I wanted to remind her of how things used to be. I set the table, dimmed the lights, and lit a few candles, just like we did when we were newlyweds. I was excited and hoped that tonight would be different. She came in around 7 p.m., threw her bag on a chair, and I greeted her with a smile. She barely glanced at me before quickly replying, "Hi." Her gaze fell on the table and the dinner I had spent hours preparing. No smile, no sign of gratitude. Instead, she muttered, "I already ate." My heart sank and I quietly repeated her words. "You already ate?" "Yes, I had a snack with the girls after work," she said, taking off her shoes. She walked straight to the couch, sat down, and without a word, took out her phone. I just sat there looking at her, hoping she would notice my disappointment, hoping she would appreciate my efforts. But she continued scrolling through her screen, her face lit up by the light of her phone, completely detached from me and the dinner I had prepared for her. Finally, after sitting in silence for a while, I spoke. "Grace." She didn't look up. "Are we okay?" She exhaled irritably, as if I were wasting her time. "Justin, why do you keep asking me that?" "Because we don't talk anymore," I said. "You don't even look at me the way you used to." She rolled her eyes. "I'm just tired. It's not that important." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she was really just tired. But deep down, I knew the truth. She wasn't tired. She just didn't care. For weeks, I told myself that I was overthinking things, that all marriages go through phases like this. But I felt like I was living with a stranger. She wasn't the wife I used to know. She was just someone who happened to live in the same house as me and treated me like an invisible roommate rather than her partner. Then came the night when everything changed. We had dinner together. That is, I ate while she picked at her plate and scrolled through her phone. After dinner, I cleared the table, which she had always helped with before. When I returned to the living room, she was sitting hunched over on the couch, still glued to her phone, her expression blank, illuminated by the screen. I stood there looking at her, feeling a heavy emptiness in my chest. I walked over and sat down next to her. "Grace, we need to talk." Without looking up, she replied, "About what?" "About us. About this distance between us." She sighed and finally put her phone down. There was no sadness or fear in her eyes, only boredom. "Justin, I don't know what you want from me." "I want my wife back," I said, feeling anger and grief mingling in my chest. She snorted contemptuously and crossed her arms. "I never left." "Then why do I feel like I'm married to a ghost? We haven't been close for months. You barely touch me, barely talk to me. You act like you can't stand me." Rolling her eyes again, she said, "I told you I'm tired. Can't you just accept that?" "You're always tired," I said, raising my voice despite my attempts to remain calm. "That's all I ever hear from you. But all I see are your excuses to avoid me." She shook her head in exasperation. "Oh, so now you're telling me how I feel. If I want to, I will. If I don't, I won't. It's that simple." And then she said it, the words that broke something inside me. "What I do with my body is none of your business." I felt like she had hit me. I stared at her, stunned. "What?" I whispered. Leaning back on the couch, her arms still crossed, she said, "Just because we're married doesn't mean I owe you anything." Something inside me broke. I wasn't asking for something I wasn't ready to give. I wasn't demanding. I was begging her for intimacy. "Grace," I said quietly, "this isn't about obligations. It's about love. About intimacy with the person you married." She laughed dryly. "You're so dramatic. It's not all about you, Justin." A cold, suffocating silence fell between us. That was it. At that moment, I knew it was really over. I knew I was the only one still holding on, and that I had finally given up. I looked at her, really looked at her, at this woman I once loved, the woman I had built my whole life around, and all I saw was a person who had let me go long ago. For months, I had begged for crumbs of love. I had made excuses for her coldness. I convinced myself that if I tried harder, waited longer, she would come back to me. But in that moment, I saw the truth clearly. She wasn't coming back because she was already gone. She had left our marriage long before that conversation, just waiting for me to realize it. And now, I finally did. Something had changed in me. It was as if a weight I had been carrying around for years had suddenly disappeared. I felt no anger, no heartbreak. I wasn't even sad anymore. I was just done. I stood up. "Okay," I said. Grace frowned. "What does that mean?" she asked. I walked over to the chair, picked up my jacket, and put it on. "It means I hear you, loud and clear." She let out a dry, almost mocking laugh. "So, are you leaving?" she asked. I looked at her one last time, at this woman who had once been my whole world. "Yes, I'm leaving." I didn't yell or slam the door. There was no dramatic exit. I just walked out and felt free for the first time in many years. That night, I checked into a hotel because I didn't know where else to go. My hands were shaking as I handed my credit card to the clerk at the front desk. My mind was racing with thoughts about what had just happened. I sat down on the edge of the hard hotel bed, stared at the wall, and waited for regret, sadness, or anger to wash over me. But none of that happened. I felt only exhaustion. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't fighting anymore. I thought about writing to Grace. Part of me hoped she would contact me first, ask where I was, at least pretend she cared. But hours passed and my phone remained silent. A whole day went by, then another. Nothing. Then I realized I had done the right thing by leaving. She wasn't worried or heartbroken. She wasn't even interested in where I had gone. She had become so used to me always being around, always running after her, that she assumed I would come back, as I always had. But this time, I wasn't coming back. About a week later, she finally wrote to me. "Are you really leaving because of this? Grow up. I reread that message over and over, waiting for it to evoke some emotion in me. But I felt nothing. That was enough. The next day, I filed for divorce. At first, she didn't take it seriously. She believed I was bluffing, just trying to scare her. But then the papers arrived, and she realized it was no longer a game. Then the calls and messages started. Her late-night voice messages were full of tears. "Justin, please. I didn't mean it. I'll change. We can fix this. You can't just walk out on me like this." But the truth was, I wasn't walking out on anything. She was the one who walked out, a long time ago. She kept begging me to change my mind. At first it was text messages and voicemails, then she started calling more often, showing up at places I frequented, near my office, near my gym. Finally, she found out where I had moved and showed up at my apartment, knocking on my door late at night. Her voice was trembling with desperation, so different from the cold indifference she had shown me before. "Justin, please. I know I messed up, but I can change. We can fix this." I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I had already given her every chance when it mattered. She promised things would be different, but love isn't about promises. Love is what you do. Her actions had already shown me where I stood in her life. I wasn't her husband. I was just someone she thought would always be there, no matter how little she gave in return. So I let her go. I gradually moved on. Some nights were harder than others. Sometimes I found myself reaching for my phone to call her and fall back into old habits. But then I remembered how she looked at me that evening on the couch with a completely impassive face when she said, "What I do with my body is none of your business." You don't say that to someone you love. You say that when you stop caring. A few months later, the divorce was final. Signing the papers was unreal. I believed I would feel regret or a sense of loss. But when I put down the pen and pushed the papers across the table, I felt only relief. I was free. With that chapter closed, I began to rebuild my life. I focused on work, spent time with friends, and returned to old hobbies that I had neglected during my marriage. Then I met a new woman. Her name was Maria. She was everything Grace was not. Grace was cold and distant, while Maria was warm and attentive. Grace ignored me, but Maria made me feel seen. We met by chance, but our conversations turned into dates, and the dates turned into something I hadn't felt in years: happiness. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just existing. I was truly living. Then one evening, there was a knock on my door. It was just after 8. I hesitated to answer, thinking it was a neighbor or a delivery person. But when I opened the door, there she was, Grace. Her hair was tousled, her eyes puffy and red from crying. She looked smaller, as if the confidence that had once been her armor had disappeared. "Justin," she whispered. Behind me in the living room, Maria stood watching the door. Grace looked from me to her, her face contorted. "Who the hell is she?" she demanded sharply. I sighed, tired of everything that could happen. "This is Maria, my girlfriend." Grace opened her mouth but said nothing, then laughed bitterly and without humor. "Wow," she said mockingly. "You found someone new so quickly, huh?" "Why are you here, Grace?" I asked, losing my patience. She ran her hand through her hair, and her face changed. The anger was replaced by something softer, more broken. "I tried to date other people, Justin," she said quietly. "I tried to move on, but nothing worked. Now I realize you were the only one. You always were." I swallowed, feeling a strange mixture of pity and disappointment. But love? Number. That feeling died the night she told me my feelings didn't matter. "It's too late, Grace," I said calmly. "I begged you to care about me when it mattered. I fought for us, and you didn't. Now you want me back because you're lonely? Because your relationship didn't work out?" Her face contorted with anger. "I can't believe you're doing this to me," she said sharply, "after everything we've been through." "No, Grace," I said firmly, After everything I've been through. She stood there breathing heavily, her fists clenched. Do you believe she's different? She asked contemptuously, nodding toward Maria. She'll leave you too, just like I did, just like all of them. Maria didn't even flinch. She reached out and took my hand, standing beside me. Grace slumped. She expected me to forgive her. She expected to see the old me, the one who always forgave, who always stayed. But that person was gone. It's over, Grace, I finally said. Don't come back here. She stood there for a moment, as if she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Then she turned and walked away. I closed the door behind her and locked it. Maria squeezed my hand. Are you okay? She asked quietly. I turned to her and smiled for the first time in a long, long time. Yes, I said. I'm really okay. And I meant every word.